Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to the Accursed. You know, among the families of the primal, few are as reviled, few are as treated with fear as the nest. And who can blame us for thinking this way? When you think of rats, do you think of cuddly pets that show you affection? Well, some of you might. But most people, when they think of rats, they think of plague. It's the first connection. Or they think of sewers and crawling through streams of shit. They might, if they're historically minded, think of the trenches and rats burrowing through the bodies that have been used to clad up the trench walls. They are unlikely to think of anything kind, affectionate, respectable. Rats are bottom feeders. Rats are vermin. They're pests. But the nest would say to you in rebuttal, no, rats are survivors. The rats have always been there. You are the ones intruding on our territory. And so that's often how it is. You know, the hides, they will announce themselves with some grand display of monstrosity. The raptors will announce themselves upon their arrival with a great deed, or by showing you their strength or their intellect. The nest, they don't announce themselves at all. They've always been here, crawling through forgotten tunnels, abandoned utility corridors, crawl spaces, condemned tenements. The nest are always present. It's just you may not be aware of them. About the only signal that they are present is a sudden chill in the air. The nest, they are patient. They're not as ferocious as the lichens. They are communal. And most disturbing of all, they genuinely believe that through their deeds they are saving the world. You know, the nest are a family descended from the rat creature. What do I mean by that? Well, the vast majority of primal families believe that they are descended from some mortal who was cursed through some injustice or because they did some great wrong. Not the nest. The nest believe they are descended from the great rat. That the humans are the aberration. The rat is at the core of themselves. Now, they don't have a grand mythology that tells you where this rat came from, what this rat did to spawn such a legion of descendants, but one thing they are certain of is they are rat first, human second. They tolerate the term wererats, but they react with hostility when they are referred to as the Sekur. And there's a reason for this. The Sekur were another wererat family. They would hold, according to the nest, a completely distinct family of wererats in the primal. One devoted to plague, to corruption, to disease. The Sekur are supposedly extinct. If you believe the propaganda, the Sphinx were behind it. If you dig a little deeper, you might find it was the nest who supplied the necessary information to make that extinction happen. The oldest stories among the nest describe a catastrophe. It's known as the Winter Exile. There's no dates for it, but at my guess, I'd put it somewhere in the 15th century. The fact is, no reliable witnesses remain or speak on it now. The tale changes from city to city, but according to nest elders, who are sometimes referred to as whiskers, their ancestors were hunted nearly to extinction. Entire bloodlines vanished. The killers vary, depending on the storytellers. Hungry, witch hunters, outcasts, governments, rival primal, or even humanity itself. Every version, however, of this tale contains the same imagery. Cold. Not ordinary cold, but a supernatural winter, called down to freeze the rats in their nests. These families, they froze together in abandoned cellars. Rat shifters huddled together beneath cities while blizzards raged across continents. Children disappeared into snow-filled tunnels. Entire nests survived only because they piled together for warmth and ate through the dead, while the world forgot they existed. Whatever happened, the experience scarred the family's soul. Today, the nest channel elemental ice through their curse. Their blood runs cold. Frost forms around their claws. Their presence lowers temperatures. They embrace winter not because they love it, but because they have shown a mastery of it. They survived it. They are the kings of winter. Now, there are many who look at the nest and they'll say, well, a rat isn't a natural friend to the cold. The nest are not a friend to the cold. They use it as a weapon because it was a weapon used against them, and they showed mastery over it. The family's philosophy emerged from the winter exile, this trauma. Survival through solidarity. A lone rat dies, a nest endures. But this takes us again back to the Sakura and this strange family relationship. There are some who would tell you that at one point this was all one family, and the Sakura were the rats on the positive end of things, and the nest were the ones on the negative, and the Sakura triumphed until about the 19th century when they were finally eliminated, whereas the nest were the ones betrayed and frozen for some time. The official history is fairly simple. The Sakura were plague bringers. They spread sickness among both humans and accursed. Eventually, they were exterminated to protect the world. This official history is suspicious at best. The nest become visibly angry if you ask them about the Sakura, and there are no records written about the Sakura, or the ones that do exist, and there are fragments are contradictory. Ancient references that you can obtain through a friendly Nephilim, if you ask nicely, or archivist, occasionally describe the Sakura not as a separate family, but as a political movement within an older rat lineage. So as I say again, there's persistent rumours that the nest and Sakura are, in fact, the same family. It's just at one point they diverged into two sizable broods, and rats, being rats, are often the targets of extermination. The nest survived their attempt. The Sakura did not. You know, there's another rumour that the Sakura never spread disease at all. Rather, they discovered something terrible beneath the world's cities, something infectious not to the body, but to reality itself, liminalities, something that could tear down walls between worlds. In attempting to contain it, they became associated with plague. The most frightening theory appears in fragments recovered from abandoned tunnels beneath Eastern Europe, and according to these writings, the Sakura weren't exterminated, they were transformed into something different. It was a massive self-mutilation, where the family cut away a part of its own nature. And in these tales, the Sakura became outsiders, or if you prefer, insiders, because they are still here, still among us, just as the nest crawled through the walls. Some nest tunnels contain sealed chambers, marked with symbols even their elders refuse to discuss, and on winter nights, scratching is reportedly heard from behind these walls. Every primal family serves the urges of its creature. For the nest, these urges are sabotage, subversion, demolition. The rat doesn't challenge the fortress from the front gate. It enters through cracks in the foundation. Nest philosophy, therefore, focuses on identifying systems that are rotten or corrupt, dangerous, unstable, and unsustainable, and they focus on bringing them down. To outsiders, this likely appears revolutionary. As far as the nest is concerned, it's just maintenance. Many members of this family see modern civilization as a structure suffering from terminal decay. Environmental collapse, pollution, corruption, exploitation, poisoned ecosystems, social inequality as well, something that is reflected in many of their lifestyles, aren't merely political concerns to them. They're symptoms of spiritual and liminal contamination. A nest operative might spend years infiltrating a corporation responsible for environmental destruction. A nest, let's call them a scholar, might sabotage data centers that conceal ecological crime. Another member of the family might direct dozens of their young to expose this corruption, destroy harmful infrastructure, undermine criminal enterprise. This isn't a family interested in conquest. They're not the Hydes, they're not the Raptors, they're not the Sphinx, they're not even the Lycans. They seek collapse. This distinction matters greatly to them. They're not interested in taking over the remains. They're quite happy to see what the survivors build in their turn, because the Nest believe through catastrophe, through adversity, comes a sort of triumph. The greatest danger facing the Nest isn't their enemies, it's their cold anger. They remember the abandonment, they remember extermination, and of course they feel this memory through the cold. This cold fuels their hatred. Now, to counter this tendency, Nest culture prizes emotional discipline. Members speak of placing ice in the veins, a mental state where vengeance freezes into clarity. A Nest assassin, for example, is expected to act without rage. A Nest revolutionary is expected to act without hatred. And a Nest whisker, who cannot separate personal grievances from communal necessity, is considered, well, dangerous to the rest of the Nest. This philosophy creates one of the Nest's most unsettling characteristics. The Nest appear calm. There aren't many primal who you can use that word to describe. They appear calm, cold, in control, analytical, reasonable. And then they calmly explain why a powerful enemy must disappear. Frost gathering on the walls tends to make listeners nervous, but they do pay attention. The family organizes itself through interconnected communities, known as nests. I know, very uninventive, but it helps. And a nest functions simultaneously as family, refuge, intelligence network, resistance cell, and every member belongs to a nest within the nest. No member is abandoned. At least that's the ideal. Pups, the youngest, they perform reconnaissance, courier work, infiltration. They learn their duties. Pups will often know every hidden route through their local territory and liminalities. Veteran members, known as whiskers, as mentioned, they preserve history, they maintain alliances, they settle disputes. Their authority stems from survival more than formal rank, and they haven't quite developed the cannibalistic reputation of many other elder primal. That isn't to say that whiskers don't devour their young to preserve their lives, but the stigma isn't quite so profound within the nest as it is other primal families. There's a particularly militant faction within the family that uses the title Cossacks. These nest members embrace direct action, sabotage, organized campaigns against perceived threats. Despite this structure, the family is highly decentralized. Destroying one nest rarely affects another. Information travels through personal connections, hidden routes and routines, coded messages, old favors, that kind of thing. And like rats themselves, the family is very difficult to eradicate. They lack a single heart or single leader to destroy. And their territories are established, well, openly. I would say openly, but openly is the wrong word because you'd need to know where they are to know that they're open. They establish territories beneath the territories of other people, whether humans or accursed. A district claimed by another family may contain forgotten subway tunnels. Well, that's where you'll find the nest. An abandoned shopping centre might secretly house dozens of nest members. Entire neighbourhoods can unknowingly sit atop generations of hidden infrastructure. Some urban explorers have fallen afoul of this, and those stories rarely end well. They These passages, they'll twist in directions that shouldn't exist, bleeding into liminalities. Temperatures plunge below freezing. Footprints appear in frost behind explorers rather than ahead of them. Most of these explorers never find the exits they used to enter. The Nest deny responsibility for these individuals going missing, but their smiles and the trophies they carry would imply otherwise. Publicly, the Nest present themselves as environmental defenders, social revolutionaries, survivors, but privately, they will whisper of another mission. They claim that pollution, corruption, social decay, all of these things, they attract enemies from the outsides, and these incursions are supposedly invisible to most supernatural beings until it's too late. According to Nest doctrine, every poisoned river, every contaminated industrial site, every spiritually rotten institution creates openings through which alien horrors can enter reality. The belief explains the Nest's obsession with demolition. But whether this threat is real, or was just created to appeal to others, because everyone can understand fighting back against the tide, when the tide is poison. This is the question. You see, the Nest talk a big game about saving the world, making it a greener place. But the fact is, there isn't a huge amount of evidence to indicate that they have been fighting this war, that their sabotage, their demolitions are purely focused on these objectives. Everything seems a lot more personal when you dig in a little deeper, when you start scratching through the surface, burrowing through as a rat might. You start to realize that a lot of the Nest's enemies were formed long, long ago in the family's history, that everything might just be born from one cold grudge that's been seething away beneath the surface, cracking the earth around it until eventually it's all just going to fall in and the Nest will finally feel satisfied for claiming the vengeance that they've long harbored. But sure, let's believe that they are eco-warriors and nature's champions. That's what they want us to think. But keep your eyes open, because the Nest, they're not a family I go to when I want the truth. They're a family I go to when I want something destroyed, but truth, I'd probably look elsewhere.